Number 11, Circle of Life, in Jesus' Name, Part 3, Chapter 22. It's November 10th, 11 a.m. Sunday morning, South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Ricky Keno smiled as he gazed at his family sitting around the dining table. Bree, young Eric, Jordan, Taylor and Gabe, Alec, Desi, Jewel, Josie, and Jamie. A year ago at this time, it would only have been the four of them. They'd grown, more than doubled, and the new people added are wonderful, amazing people. Dad? Ricky glanced at young Eric. You okay? Young Eric asked his father. Ricky nodded. I'm just looking at our increase. Quick, Eric, what's the percentage? Young Eric rolled his eyes. Too easy, Dad. He glanced around the table. It used to be 4, now we have 11. That's a 175% increase. He looked down at Jordan and squeezed her hand. And a little over 57% of the increase came from Jordan's family, and a little over 28% came from Alec and Desi, and only 14% came from the Tanner family. But if you add in values, then our increase is in the thousands, maybe millions. Ricky chuckled. I agree. That reminds me, 3, I'm going to need some tutoring help. Exams are coming up, and I'm struggling in calculus, Jordan said. He nodded. No sweat, 2-3. We got this. Jewel, Bree began, this brunch has been one of the best meals I've ever had. You are a treasure. Oh, stop, Jewel said softly. You helped make this meal, and you did a good job. Bree laughed. I tried, but you're teaching me a lot. Well, the hash brown egg casserole thing, you're going to have to make 2 of those next time, young Eric said. I could have eaten the whole thing. You almost did, Gabe complained. Taylor smiled. I loved the deviled strawberries. Yeah, those were so good, Desi agreed. I loved it all, Alex said. I think I made a pig of myself. Bree shook her head. No, you ate just like any teen boy would. Well, whatever any of you like to eat, I'll be happy to make it for you, Jewel offered. Ricky frowned. You're spoiling them. He lifted his phone when it buzzed. Finally. Finally what? Young Eric asked. We have company. Who? Your cousins/brothers and grandfather. Really? What are we going to do? Ricky stood. You're going to stay right there. He turned and went to the door and greeted his father and Jojo and Logan. Hey, guys, come on in. They entered the dining room. Bree stood and went to greet them, kissing each on their cheek. What can I get for you? We've just had an amazing brunch, thanks to Jewel. Well, I've already eaten with Shelley and the little ones, Eric Sr. said. Jojo laughed. Well, we've already eaten too, but that won't stop us. Come in the kitchen and fill your plates, Bree offered graciously. When the 3 newcomers took a seat around the dining room table, Ricky smiled. Okay, young Eric, how much increase is this? Where overall increase is 250%. New increase is 27.27 repeating. Alec chuckled. That is amazing. He's just showing off. Sometimes he has to use a pencil, Taylor joked. Oh, wow, imagine having to use a pencil, Gabe said sarcastically. Jojo moaned. Oh, man, this stuff. This is so good. Bree nodded. That's a hash brown and egg casserole, and it's thanks to Jewel. And you're lucky there was any left, Taylor said. So why are you guys here? Young Eric asked. You'll see, Logan said with a smile. How's Jeffy and the baby? Jordan asked. Grandmaster Keno smiled. She's doing fine, and little Elijah is nursing well and very strong. He can already lift his head a little. So, Eric Sr. began, I'm here for a reason. And Logan and Jojo came along because they wanted to be witnesses. Witnesses? Logan took out his phone and spoke. Are you guys there? Yes. Gabe frowned and looked at Logan's phone. Dad? Yes, son, and Master Apple, and all of your family. Grandmaster Keno smiled and placed a box on the table, wrapped it in white paper, and tied with a black ribbon. Pass this down to Gabe, please. Gabe's eyebrows shot up. A gift for me? Yes, for you, Gabriel Tanner. With permission from Master Apple and with your family and brothers as witnesses, we would like to present to you this token of your skills. Gabe opened the box and pulled out a black belt with 2 golden stripes on one end of the belt, and on the other end were words in gold. He read them aloud. Courage, humility, love, and gratitude. He looked up, his eyes filled with tears. I'm a 2nd degree? Well, you are so much more than that, young man, Grandmaster Kino replied. Remember, this is just a token of your skills. You've progressed, and you've earned it. I'm so proud of you, Gabe, Master Apple said over the phone. Thank you, Master Apple, and I'm proud to be your student. Go ahead and put it on, Keegan said. Gabe stood and tied the belt around his waist and stepped back from the table. Grandmaster Kino stood. Ricky stood. Young Eric stood. Logan and Jojo stood. Taylor stood. Josie and Jamie stood. Gabe bowed to each of them, and they all bowed back to him. Wow, Gabe said. I had no idea this was coming. I'm proud of you, son, Keegan said. Taylor sighed. Me too. Thanks, Gabe murmured. I'm really touched, and I can't think of the right words to say. Well, that's a first, Jordan said, making everyone laugh. Eric Sr. smiled. And now, while I have everyone's attention, he placed another box on the table. Pass that down to young Eric. Young Eric's mouth opened in surprise. He quickly opened the box and removed the black belt. It had 4 gold stripes at one end, and the same wording as Gabe's at the other end. His lips pressed tightly together. Without saying a word, he wrapped the belt around his waist and tied it. He looked up into his father's eyes, then turned and bowed to his grandfather, and then father, and then Jojo, Logan, Gabe, Taylor, Jamie, and Josie, in that order. He looked up. Thank you, Granddad and Dad, for training me and for this token of my skills. I'll work hard to be worthy of it and to honor the Kino name and to honor Zendo Rue. Yeah, Gabe said suddenly. That's what I should have said. Well, you honor Apple Martial Arts first and then the Kino name, Grandmaster Kino said. Yes, sir, and thank you, Master Apple, for training me so well, and thank you, Grandmaster Kino and Grandmaster Kino, for training me for the mini-mart so well. You're welcome, John Apple replied. You're a good student. I agree, Grandmaster Kino said with a nod and a smile. Jojo and Logan grabbed young Eric and hugged him and punched him and messed up his hair and then grabbed Gabe and did the same. Pictures, please, Bree said as she held up her phone. Young Eric and Gabe together, and then with Eric and Ricky, and then with Logan and Jojo, and then with everyone here. The guys all obeyed. Okay, everyone, let's get the table cleared, Bree said afterward. Desi and Alec have somewhere important to be. Desi offered a small but nervous smile. Ricky noticed her nervousness, and he approached her and Alec. Hey, you two. I know you might be a little nervous, but don't worry too much. Just be yourselves. Fill your hearts with love. Honor your father and mother, but don't compromise your own principles. I realize I don't have to tell you that, but because you've already shown that you will stick to what you think is right. But be strong, be kind and respectful, and listen, just to prepare you for what might be said. His text said he wanted to apologize, but what he apologizes for may not be what you think he should apologize for. So take whatever gift he gives, take it graciously. But your father is a strong man, and he's also used to being in control. So he may try to take back some of that control. There's a possibility he might even invite you to move back into the house, or he may not. I'm just telling you to be prepared for something out of left field. And what should I do if he invites me back to move back in? Desi asked. Well, that's completely up to you. In 1 week, you'll be a married woman living with your husband in your own home. If you want things to remain status quo, then decline respectfully. If you'd like to live there your last week of being their child, then do it. But don't let anyone talk you into something you don't want to do. Well, I'm a little afraid to move back in right away, even for a week. Then don't, Alex said quickly. Ricky smiled. Let's not think the worst. I wasn't trying to scare you, just wanted to prepare you for what could happen. Still, if he asks and you feel uncomfortable, then decline. However, if it would help, you can invite them to stay here with you the day and night before the wedding. We have plenty of room. Tell them you're going to have a little girls' day and night on Friday, doing whatever rituals you girls do before your wedding, and tell your father that the guys will all get together too, and he is invited. I didn't know we were doing a little thing the night before, Desi said. Oh, well, I didn't know it was a surprise, so oops. Alex smiled. I won't tell, but Mr. Kino, you've already done so much for us, we don't expect anything else. He shrugged. Nevertheless, it's happening. These guys, he said, motioning toward young Eric, Logan, Gabe, and JoJo, are not going to have you go off to be a married man without some kind of send-off. Well, I'm still blown away by the kindness you've all shown to a complete stranger. I have a feeling it's not complete. Before we came to this earthly realm, there was a plan. Anyway, enough talk. You guys need to get ready. So listen, one more thing. Say a prayer before you get out of the car, and no matter what happens, we'll be here for you. Alec extended his hand. Thank you, sir. Thank you for everything. He smiled. Well, you're welcome. But we're not done yet. Let's get you two married and settled and you working. And a few years down the road, when you're graduated and past the bar, you can thank me by paying it forward. I promise I will, Alec said. I believe you. New scene. Same day, 12:30 p.m., Sunday afternoon at the Copeland home, Hillcrest, California. Charity Copeland went to find her father. He was uncharacteristically in the kitchen, helping her mother with the luncheon that they were preparing for Destiny and Alec, and one other surprise guest. They had hurried home from church and started working on the meal. Her father was wearing an apron, something she remembered him doing a long time ago when she was little, and they would have backyard cookouts. It warmed her heart to see it now. It was like amazing changes were taking place in this household, and it was a miracle brought on by Desi making a mistake. And it suddenly dawned on Charity that maybe it was all part of a plan. Dad, Charity said quietly. He turned and smiled at her. You want to know what you can do to help? He nodded at the block of cheese sitting on the cutting board. You can cut that into cubes and put it on that plate next to the bowl of grapes. Okay, I will, but I wanted to, I'd like to talk to you privately, if that's okay. He glanced at his watch. I can squeeze out a few minutes for you. Let's go to my office. Marvy? She smiled. You go ahead, I've got this. Charity walked to the office and sat in the chair in front of the desk that was usually filled by his clients. What is it you'd like to talk about? She swallowed hard. Dad, I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that you invited Desi and Alec to lunch, but I'm a little nervous about it. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'm worried that you'll get them here and then start fussing at them for what they did, and it'll all blow up. He sighed and nodded. You have good reason to think that might happen. I haven't exactly been a role model for piety or honor lately. I'm trying, Charity. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf, a new page. I'm trying to remember how I used to feel before I got all bogged down at making a living. I asked Desi and Alec and Ivana Morgan here for lunch because I want to apologize to them all, and I guess I should have made that clear to you. You're gonna apologize to them? He nodded. What Ricky Kino said really shook me, and then it was you, my eldest daughter, my very brave and smart daughter, who had the courage to say things to me that needed to be said. Something you said, I'm not sure what part, but something hit its mark. Something hit home and woke me up. It was like I was in a trance of some kind. I left the room and I went to do something I haven't really done in a long time. I got down on my knees and I prayed. And my heart began to soften and the light in my brain went on. I don't know how I got so far off from the man I always thought I was to the one I'd become. I spoke with your mom and with our pastor this morning, and he prayed with me and he counseled me, and I know that I have to humble myself and do this thing today. Dad, this makes me very happy. It makes my heart feel light. But I just want to say, if they say something you don't like, please don't get angry. I understand your fear, Charity, but don't worry, I'm good. He smiled. And honey, I need to apologize to you too. I'm sorry I haven't been the father you've needed lately. I let my priorities get way out of whack, and I'm going to try to make it up to you. She smiled. I can't even believe what I'm hearing. A few days ago, the world seemed so dark and gray, and there was no joy. But right now, I feel like I could sing and dance and shout for joy. I'm sorry, honey. I'm sorry I made everything so dark and sad. I'll try to do better. But I'll still make mistakes, and I hope you can forgive me. I need to be the man you can depend on. He smiled and stood and came around the desk and held out his arms, and she went into them and sighed. I'm amazed, Dad, that life can feel so happy just by learning that your father is a good man. Her words stung a bit, and he didn't respond because the comment got to him and his emotions welled up. He sniffed. Okay, well, let's go finish helping your mom. She nodded and gave a small giggle at her father getting emotional. She suddenly felt so light and happy. She looked heavenward a moment and silently thanked God for the miracle that was taking place. New scene. Alec pulled the car into the Copeland driveway as he had so many times during his senior year in high school, the last time being a few weeks after the prom, when he'd picked Desi up because she had something to tell him. He put the car in park, turned off the ignition, and turned to look at Desi. She was wringing her hands and blew out a big breath. You nervous? She nodded. I won't let things escalate, he said. I promise. If things get out of hand, we'll just leave. She nodded. He got out and went around to help her out of the car. She stood and straightened the outfit Mrs. Keno and Taylor had chosen for her. She wore maternity jeans with black suede boots and a loose-fitting, lightweight white sweater that had a V-neck with a lace insert for modesty. She looked up at Alec, smoothing her long blonde hair and tucking it behind her ears. Do I look okay? He smiled. You look amazing. Come on, let's do this. He took her hand and walked her to the door. It was weird, walking up to her own door and ringing the doorbell. The door opened immediately, and Charity squealed at the sight of her baby sister. Get in here, she ordered. Desi stepped inside and was hugged fiercely by her older sister. Charity then pushed her back and looked her over. Oh, Desi, you are so adorable. You mean I'm fat? I mean you're adorable. Ooh, goodness, sorry. A bug just flew into my eye. I mean you're adorable. She looked over Desi's shoulder and motioned at Alec. Alec, come in, come in. He stepped inside and shut the door. Marvinia came rushing into the room. Oh, my baby girl, she cried as she held her arms out to Desi. She hugged her daughter for a long time, pulled away, put her hands on both her cheeks, and looked into her eyes. They both had tears running down their cheeks, and finally she turned to Alec with a smile. Hello, Alec, she said softly. He nodded. Hi, Mrs. Copeland. These are for you. He handed her the bouquet of flowers he'd brought, Gabe's idea. Oh, thank you, they're beautiful, she gushed. She looked up at the handsome boy. May I give you a hug, too? He nodded, and they gave each other a brief hug. Well, I'll just go put these in some water. You two come in and make yourselves at home. She immediately grimaced at the casual statement. It had been Destiny's home almost her whole life, and it seemed sort of strange to tell her to make herself at home. Charity led them into the living room and sat on the sofa and patted the place next to her. Come sit, you guys. I'm so happy to see you. I can't stand it. Desi and Alec sat on the sofa, the same one they'd snuggled and kissed on many a night after her parents had gone to bed. It seemed so different now. I heard the baby is due at the end of January, Charity said. How did you hear that? Desi asked. Ricky Keno told us. Oh, yeah, of course. So isn't he just the cutest? Charity said. He looks just like he does in the movies. Yeah, we were a little starstruck the first time we met him, but I think it was Mrs. Keno, the Brianna Adams, that really blew us away. She's so gorgeous. What's the first thing you remember her saying? Oh, she invited us in and chattered away. I can't really remember, but the first thing that really impressed me was she did our laundry. I mean, Brianna Adams washed our clothes and folded them and hung some things up and like a regular mother would do. And that's what's so cool about her. She's like a regular person. Yeah, Alec put in, but they're not regular at all. They are the most dynamic, strong people I've ever known. Desi nodded. He's right. Every single day they do something that blows me away. Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to meet them. Them together. She looked back and forth between Alec and her sister. And how are you two getting along? Desi smiled and placed her hand in Alec's. We are awesome. Charity nodded. You are so cute together, and I'm happy for you. Alec jumped to his feet as Dustin Copeland came into the room. He turned and helped Desi to her feet. She turned fearful eyes up to her father, and then her father smiled. Destiny, he said softly and moved forward. He hugged her briefly and set her away and looked her over. It's so good to see you, he said softly. Then turned to Alec and offered his hand. And you too, Alec. I mean that. Alec shook the man's hand. Thank you, sir. Well, you kids sit down. I have something to say to you, and I'd like to get it over with so that we can sit down and enjoy this delicious lunch your mother's cooked up for us. Plus, we have another guest coming, so I'd like to have this discussion before she arrives. Oh, okay, Desi said, her voice cautious. Dad, do you want me to leave? Charity asked. He shook his head. No, I'd like you to stay. Marvinia then came into the room and set the vase of flowers on the side table. Honey, you come sit down too. This needs to be said in front of everyone. Desi's eyes were open wide. This was very strange. The whole atmosphere, everything seemed different. She watched her father as he took a seat. He sat on the edge of the chair and looked into her eyes and over to Alec and then back to her eyes. I want to apologize to you both. The way I've behaved since learning that Desi was pregnant has been shameful. I realize that now. I have no excuses to give you. I've searched my mind, trying to understand how I could have reacted the way I did, what made me so mad, to where I would throw my own daughter out of her home, to where I would think about forcing my own daughter to give away my own grandson to be adopted. Desi's indrawn breath showed she hadn't known that little piece of information. He nodded at her reaction. It's shocking, isn't it? The only answer I found was what your sister said to me and what Ricky Keno intimated, that I was embarrassed that my daughter, the daughter of the great Christian church-going upright Dustin Copeland, would end up pregnant out of wedlock. My reaction was definitely not Christian in any way. Jesus said, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, I'm ashamed to say that I was throwing stones at the two of you when what I should have done was helped you through it, helped you find a way to handle it. I should have set an example of forgiveness. I should have offered my assistance. I should have done exactly what the Kenos have done for you, or at least I should have tried. I don't have their connections, but there are things I could have and should have done to help you. Dad, Desi began, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Desi. I have to humble myself completely. I have to bare my soul not only to you and the young man who's about to be your husband, but to my other daughter who's been rightfully ashamed of me, and to my wife who has been patiently waiting for me to come around. Patiently waiting even though her own heart was breaking over the loss of her youngest child and her grandchild. So, I'm remorseful, I'm repenting, and I'm asking for God's forgiveness, and I'm asking for your forgiveness. I will do whatever you need me to do to make it right. I'll help you in any way I can. There was silence for a moment, and then it was, surprisingly, Alec who spoke up. Mr. Copeland, I am not in a place to forgive anything because I have to ask forgiveness myself. I'm sorry that I compromised your daughter. I want you to know that it wasn't done for a notch in my belt. I truly love her, and I was drinking, and I got carried away in the moment, and it happened. My actions have caused her and your family and my own mother so much pain, and I'm so sorry. Alec, you didn't force me, Desi said quickly. I was all in because I love you too with all my heart, and I wanted to be with you. But Dad, I am sorry. I too got caught up in the moment, and I knew better, and I did it anyway. So, I hope you can forgive me too. I didn't realize the consequences could be so hard, that they could tear a whole family apart. Dustin nodded. It shouldn't have torn our family apart. I let it do that. I'm so sorry that I didn't set a good example. Sometime during the past 10 or more years, I lost myself. I got my priorities all messed up, and I forgot what it meant to be a follower of Jesus. He smiled. So, You haven't said the word yet, and I guess that means you want to think about forgiving me, but let me just say to you that you are completely forgiven for your mistake. It happens. It's not and shouldn't be the end of the world. When we make mistakes, we make it right. And you too are making it right, and really, I'm so proud of you. Once you realized you made a mistake, you stuck to your principles and you tried to make it right, and thank God for the Kinos. Desi sniffed back her tears. Dad, I forgive you. I didn't need to think about it. I was just so surprised at how different you seemed that I was trying to digest what was happening. I forgive you, Daddy. He smiled and nodded. And you, Charity? She sniffed. Daddy, of course I forgive you. And you, Marvy? I imagine I hurt you the most, and you've put up with me all these years. She wiped tears from her cheeks. I forgive you, Dusty. Dustin nodded and looked back at Alec. Young man, I hope you too can forgive me. If I hadn't thrown my own daughter out of my house, you'd be in school right now. You were willing to give up all you'd worked for to try to support my daughter. I watched you out the bedroom window when you got here, the way you helped her out of the car, the gentle way you touched her face and smiled at her. That's the kind of treatment a good man gives to the girl he loves. And I think my daughter and my grandson are in good hands. Well, thank you for that, Mr. Copeland. I intend to be the best husband and father. And Mr. Copeland, as I was sitting here listening to this whole conversation, I realized something, and I think it's important. What's that? I think we're all on the right path. Mr. Kino says that everything happens for a reason, that God has a plan. He says God's plans change to compensate for the choices we make. So maybe things happen just the way they were supposed to happen. This event in our lives has taught me many things, and I'm ending up in an even better position than before we got pregnant. I won't have to leave Desi while I go to school. We'll have a home to live in while I'm in school. I'm going to be apprenticing at one of the nation's most prestigious law firms. All of that was because of the Kinos, and we wouldn't know the Kinos at all if Desi and I hadn't been homeless and found ourselves at that gas station. And then you just said you lost yourself many years ago, and now you say it's like you woke up out of a trance and you feel happier, right? I mean, maybe if Desi and I hadn't gotten pregnant, maybe you wouldn't ever wake up out of that trance. Maybe it took something as drastic as this to wake you up. And if God wants you to wake up, then that means he's mindful of you and he needs you for his purposes. The room was quiet a moment. Charity was thinking that she just had that exact realization a little while ago, but she didn't speak up. Finally, Dustin spoke. First, I believe you're right. And second, that was well said. And I see now that you're going to be a fine attorney one day. Thank you, sir. I didn't know you even believed in God. Well, sir, I didn't. And that might have been part of God's plan too, because living with the Kinos has opened my eyes, and I'm beginning to see that God is real, and he interacts with us, and he helps us to learn and grow. He does indeed. They all looked up at the sound of the doorbell. I'll get it, Dustin said. He walked to the door and opened it. Hello, Ivana. I'm so glad you could come. She smiled. I'm so glad you invited me. She stepped inside. Alec went to his mother and hugged her. This was going to be a wonderful day. They all sat down to a fantastic luncheon. They talked and talked, catching up on everything. They talked about Alex and Destiny's adventures. They talked about their heartbreaks. They talked about the baby and asked what the couple needed. They talked about future plans and about going to church and about the wedding that would take place at the church the following Saturday. And Mom, Mrs. Kino told me that if I felt comfortable enough to ask you and Charity if you'd like to meet her at the church tomorrow morning to make last-minute plans and make sure they have enough flowers ordered and figure out whatever else needs to be done, Desi said. If you felt comfortable enough? Well, we weren't sure how this meeting would go today. It's gone well, hasn't it? And yes, I would love to meet her at the church tomorrow. Me too, Charity said. But I can only stay a little while because I have a class in the afternoon. Wonderful, Desi said. And Mrs. Morgan, do you think you can come too? I'll see if I can go into work late. Awesome, Desi said. They adjourned to the living room and talked some more, but finally Desi began to yawn and needed to go back to the house to rest, and said so. Oh, Des, I wish you could stay here tonight, Charity said. Desi glanced at Alec. They'd made a plan in case this subject came up. I have a better idea. Why don't you come with us and spend the night with me over at the Kino's house tonight, and then I'll come here and stay the night, maybe even 2 nights. Me come to the Kino's house? Charity said. Oh, that would be interesting. Oh, it is. Will you come? Of course I will. Let me go pack a bag. She ran upstairs. Marvina smiled at her younger daughter. You seem so different. Well, Mom, I guess I've grown up a little. But I'm still the little girl who loves your lasagna and eats all the carrot cake when no one is looking. Oh, that was you? Her father said with a chuckle. Alex smiled. He felt grateful for the small family scene that was taking place and secretly vowed that even though he was only 18, in the future he would make a whole lot of these type scenes happen for his own family. New scene. November 13th. It's Wednesday afternoon, Kino Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Logan drove up to the house, pulled around to the front door, jumped out of his car, and headed inside. There was no one in sight. He immediately started down to the music room because the purpose of his visit was to pick up the extra amp he needed for one of his final exams. Once he got downstairs, he heard the clanging of the weights and headed into the fitness room. Hey, Grandma, Logan said. He took note of her weights on leg extensions. He nodded. Good job. She smiled. It's only 80 pounds. I've lifted a lot more than that. Oh, well, sorry, didn't mean to insult you. She gave a soft laugh. So who's got the kids? Melody? Shelley nodded. Yes, they're supposed to be going down for their naps while I get in a quick workout. I need my strength if I'm going to keep up with that bunch, you know. Logan nodded. Well, I came over to pick up an amp I need for tomorrow, and I think I'll go up and say hello to Melody. She smiled. That would be nice. He grinned, right? He quickly kissed her cheek. See you later. Bye, hun. He ran up the steps to the main level and headed toward the front stairway when his grandfather came through the front door. Hey, Granddad. Hello there, Logan. In a rush? Logan stopped and smiled. No, sir. I was just going up to say hello to Melody. You're kidding. Logan rolled his eyes. Where's my wife? She's downstairs working out. He nodded and headed that direction. Logan continued up the stairs, and when he got to the top, he heard a sweet sound. The door to the kids' room was open, and Melody was singing to them. He quietly approached and peeked in. The children were lying on a pallet of blankets in the middle of the room, sound asleep, and Melody was sitting on the edge of Angelina's bed, singing, You Are My Sunshine. Her light brown hair shone in the afternoon sunlight coming through the window. It was parted on the side and fell around her face. It wasn't quite as long as Jordan's, but still long enough to go in a ponytail. Her eyes looked greenish in the light. Her nose was small and turned up slightly, and her mouth always appeared to be smiling. She wore jeans and a t-shirt with a large treble clef on the front, and he wondered what that was about. He sighed and closed his eyes a moment as she sang. Her voice was clear and sweet, soft and pretty. She finished the song and he poked his head in. That was beautiful, he said. She startled briefly and then smiled and put her finger to her lips. Shh, you'll wake them, she whispered. He walked in and sat beside her on the small bed. That was beautiful, he whispered. She giggled. Well, I'm not a pro like you, but I can carry a tune. Sing it again. No. Please, sing it again and I'll join in. She breathed a sigh and then nodded. She began singing again, and he came in with the harmony. She turned toward him in surprise at how lovely it sounded together. She looked into his eyes, and he smiled at her as he sang, nodding his head to keep her going. They sang it through twice, and when they stopped, they sat there looking into each other's eyes, and it was Melody who broke the silence. Wow, she whispered. That was really nice. He nodded. It really was, wasn't it? You have a sweet voice. You do too. He laughed, and she shushed him by putting her hand over his mouth. He didn't try to remove it, but just left it there. And she finally moved it. Rising, she motioned for him to follow her, and they went out into the hallway and had a seat on the top step. So, what are you doing here this time of day? She asked. I had to come pick up an amplifier from the music room downstairs. I need it for my exam. What happened to the amp you used at the coffee shop? He smiled shyly. I dropped it down the stairs outside the music building. She giggled, which made him smile. So that's a cute shirt, he said casually. Did you wear it in my honor? She looked down at her shirt. Sure, he smiled. I like it. It was a Christmas gift from one of my brothers last year. It was in honor of my name, Melody. Oh, I get it, he said. So how old are your brothers? Philip is 16 and is a junior in high school, and Lyle is 14 and is a freshman in high school. And they both play football? She nodded. What positions? Phil is a running back, and Lyle is actually the QB for the 9th grade team. Logan nodded. That's great. Did you play football? I did. I was a receiver, but my arm got broken and I missed a season and I never went back. I got distracted by music. You broke your arm playing football? He shook his head. No. Someone broke it for me on purpose, but that's a story for another day. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, she said softly, I'm glad I got to see you because if you'd been much later, I wouldn't be here. Why? Where are you going? Well, as soon as Miss Shelley finishes her workout, I'm going home early to work on the yard. Oh, yeah, you said you were going to try to do your part during the week. So what is your part? I have to rake all the leaves front and back and bag them up. That doesn't sound too hard. She shrugged. It's not too bad. We only have one really large tree in the yard, but in the backyard the neighbors have 2 giant trees and all their leaves blow into our backyard for some reason. So that's going to be the hard part. I see. He pulled out his phone and glanced at the time. So you'll probably be there in about an hour? She nodded. Well, okay then. I have to go run some errands, but maybe I'll see you again. She frowned. You have to leave already? He smiled because it sounded as if she'd like him to stay. She'd never sounded like that before. Yes, I do. Sorry, but thanks for singing with me. Let's do it again sometime. She smiled sweetly. Let's do. She watched as he rose and galloped down the stairs and flew out the front door. She was starting to get used to the way he looked. She could almost actually speak to him now instead of freezing up. His brown hair, his light blue eyes. He was a little over 6 feet, she knew, because he was about the same height as Gabe. He was well built, again, like Gabe. Well, really, like all the Keno men. His jeans looked good on him. He usually dressed very casually, jeans and a t-shirt, sometimes a sweater or sweatshirt, now that it was November. He was definitely a hottie and way out of her league. Still, she was looking forward to the wedding on Saturday and have him next to her all day. New scene. It's still November 13th, Wednesday afternoon, UCLA campus, Los Angeles, California. Oh, shoot, I forgot my notebook, Jordan said to Agent Wyatt. Well, stay right here, I'll get it. He ran back toward the parking lot. It's lying on the floorboard, she called after him. She jumped around in a half circle, looking ahead to the science building. She was beginning to think that she would take Agent Wyatt up on his offer to get a wheelchair and wheel her around and keep her foot elevated, because right now her whole leg was throbbing. Well, hello there, my gorgeous girl. Jordan turned to see Mason Cole approaching with a huge smile on his face. She frowned. Hello, Mason. How are you feeling? I heard what happened to you. I'm fine, a little worse for wear, but getting better every day. Thanks for asking. Well, I'm so sorry that happened. But I have to say that I couldn't help but think that if your boyfriend had been with you for a change, it would never have happened. That's true, but then the guy wouldn't have been caught, and he'd still be out there terrorizing the campus. He nodded. Touché. And my boyfriend can't be by my side every minute of the day and night. Well, if you were my girl, I wouldn't let you out of my sight. She just shook her head. And now here you are in your condition, standing all alone, completely vulnerable to anyone who'd want to do you harm. Is that what you think? She asked. He glanced around and saw the security agent standing a short distance away. Oh, so that's how it is. And what do you mean by that? Well, he doesn't have time to be with you, so he throws his money at a security company to do his job. You're beginning to piss me off, she said loudly. Immediately, Agent Wyatt moved close. Are you ready to go, Miss Brooks? Yes, I am, and thanks for giving me privacy to talk to this guy, but from now on, I won't need it. Understood, Miss Brooks, he said with a smile. New scene. Melody was armed with a stack of lawn bags and a leaf rake. She decided to start in the front yard so that when her father drove up this evening, he'd notice first thing that she was doing her part like she promised. She was thinking that she might get the front yard done and part of the back today, and then she'd have to work really hard tomorrow to get the backyard finished. She started working from under the big tree in the front yard, dividing the area under the tree into 4 sections. Hey there, Melody. She turned to see a bright yellow Ford Mustang pull up to the curb in front of the house. She frowned and went back to raking. Even though she'd looked away, she knew he'd gotten out of the car because she heard the door slam. What? Are you trying to ignore me? She stopped raking and looked up and gave him a fake smile. Hello, Cade. Hello there, beautiful. You're looking better than ever. She frowned. I look exactly the same. Well then, time away from you has made me appreciate just how beautiful you are. Whatever. I see you're working hard. What are you doing here, Cade? What, I can't come by and see my girlfriend? I'm not your girlfriend. You broke up with me, remember? Aw, come on, are you still mad about that? Nope, I'm not mad at all. I'm thankful, but I'm kind of busy right now, so you may leave. Melody, you're not being very nice. You weren't very nice to me either the last several times I saw you. So you are still mad, or maybe hurt. Come on, babe, are your feelings still hurt? He came close and reached for her hand. You really can't blame me, can you? I mean, I was going off to college and you still had a year of high school. I needed to be free. I certainly couldn't be a college man and keep my little innocent high school girlfriend by my side, especially one who was holding out for whatever, her dream man, I guess. She looked down at his hand gripping hers and jerked her hand away. I have no feelings for you at all, good or bad. What are you doing here? I had some time and was nearby and thought I'd swing by and see what you were up to. Maybe you'd like to go get an ice cream or a coffee or something. I don't drink coffee, and you know that, and I wouldn't go with you anywhere. Now leave. I have work to do. She turned and headed toward the other side of the tree, but he grabbed her arm. Just wait, Melody. You're acting like a baby. Let go of my arm. He grinned. No. He pulled her forward. She tried to pull away. Let me go, Cade, or I swear. Let her go. Melody gasped as she looked up to see Logan's red SUV and Logan walking across the yard toward her. Behind him were the 2 Davis boys, Daniel and Jeremy. Logan walked straight up without stopping or hesitating, grabbed the hand that held her arm and bent it back. Cade yelled and jerked his hand away. Who the hell are you? Cade demanded. Melody blinked up at Logan, her eyes wide. I'm her boyfriend, and I don't appreciate you pawing at her. Her mouth fell open, and he smiled at her, then turned and frowned at Cade. Get back in your car and drive away, and don't even think about coming back here. And if I ever see you touch her again, I will take you out, completely and unapologetically. He backed away. Don't think you've heard the last of me, Melody. You and I need to talk. Logan advanced toward him, and Cade got in his car and sped away. Logan turned and put his hands on Melody's shoulders. Are you okay? She nodded. I don't know what he thought he was doing. Who is he? He's my ex-boyfriend. He broke up with me over a year ago, but he keeps coming by to see if I'm ready. Ready? For what? She looked at Daniel and Jeremy and back up at Logan. Oh, he said softly. He felt his temper rising and had to tamp it down. He drew a deep breath. He keeps coming by? How often does he come by? Not very often. We broke up in August of last year, right before he went off to college. I didn't see him again until last Christmas, when he stopped by. Then he came again a few months later, and then this past June. And does he always put his hands on you? She shrugged. He tries to, I guess. Each time he gets a little bolder and a little pushier and and sometimes angry, though he keeps accusing me of being mad at him. And are you? She shook her head. Well, I wasn't. I was completely over him. But now? Well, but I'm starting to get mad. He's pressuring me to go out with him, like for coffee. But I know that will turn into a wrestling match, and I have no desire to fight him off. Logan's lips pressed tightly together as he thought of tiny Melody with her sweet demeanor trying to fight off this guy who was so much bigger than her. He drew a deep breath. What did he do in high school? Do? Like, to me? He smiled. No. Well, okay. Did he do something to you in high school? She laughed. Not really. He looked over at the Davis boys. You guys go ahead and get started, and we'll join you in a minute. Dan, you get the blower. Jeremy, you grab the rake and open a bag. He looked back at her. Then how do you know it will turn into a wrestling match? Because right before we broke up, we had a few of those wrestling matches. He thought I should give myself to him as a graduation present or going away to college present, and I thought otherwise. He nodded. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Not all guys are like that. She smiled. I know. I'm sorry for what I said. I mean, for lying about being your boyfriend. It just popped out. I felt like this guy needed to know that he doesn't have the right to put his hands on you. And one thing that will usually stop a guy is to know that the girl has moved on without him. Hope you're not mad about that. She shook her head. Not really. It just surprised me. So, did this guy play sports in high school? He played football. Does he play in college? No, he's not that good. Why? Logan grinned. Just figuring out his abilities. So you know how to fight him? He shook his head. Oh, I already know that. So I can teach you how to fight him off if I'm not around. She smiled. That is so sweet of you. He laughed. Yeah, that's what I was going for. He started toward his vehicle. Come on. Let's get some equipment out of the Rover and knock this yard out. She followed him to his car. He opened the back and handed her 2 more rakes and an edger. They finished the front yard quickly, with Dan blowing the leaves from around the rest of the tree toward the tree. Blowing the leaves from the rest of the yard around the tree, and Logan, Melody, and Jeremy raking and bagging them up. 30 minutes later, the front was done. The grass still needed a final end-of-season mow, but Melody said to leave it for her brothers and father on Saturday or it will ruin their fun. In the backyard, there was not just a few more leaves. There was a ton of them. The trees she spoke of in the neighbor's yard were oaks, and the leaves were everywhere. Dan and Jeremy made 2 giant piles, and Logan couldn't resist picking up 11-year-old Jeremy and tossing him into the pile. It was so big he actually disappeared. Melody laughed. Oh, I have to get that on video. Rake the leaves together again. They did it again, and she videoed Logan and Dan tossing Jeremy into the pile. Then Logan went after Daniel and tossed him in. He whispered something to the boys, and they quickly raked the leaves back together. Then Logan handed his phone to Dan and told him to video. Logan then turned toward Melody. She shrieked and took off, but Logan caught her easily and carried her to the giant pile and tossed her in. She jumped out and grabbed a pile in her arms and dumped it over his head. Help me, guys, Melody yelled, and they all grabbed Logan and wrestled him into the leaves. Once he was on his back in the pile, they kept pushing more leaves on top of him until he was completely covered. He got very still and waited for the threesome to quiet down, and then reached up suddenly and grabbed Melody and wrestled her down into the pile and covered her up. She fought, but he straddled her and pinned her. Give up, he ordered. Never, she yelled and reached over her head, grabbed an armful of leaves and tossed them at him. He held her down and let Dan and Jeremy cover her again. Give? Yes, I give, she said as she laughed. What's going on here? They all turned to see Melody's father and 2 brothers standing on the back porch. They scrambled up and began brushing leaves off themselves and each other. Logan smiled and hurried forward to shake hands. Mr. Keith, it's nice to see you again. Hey, guys, Logan said to her brothers. He extended his hand to them. Philip and Lyle, right? Phil, Philip corrected, and good memory. Logan nodded. Hey, Dad, Melody said sweetly. Remember I promised I would get my part of the yard done because I won't be here on Saturday? He nodded. Yes, and here you are. The front yard looks great. I see you have help, though I don't see much work being done back here. She laughed. It'll get done. We sort of got into a battle. Yep, Mel, and you lost, Lyle said. She smiled. Did I? Logan chuckled. Sorry, sir. We'll get this cleaned up. It's no problem, Logan. Would you guys like to stay for dinner? Oh, wow, I'd love to, but I can't tonight. I have to get these guys home, and I have a family dinner I have to be at, and then a rehearsal. Busy young man. No worries. We'll ask again soon. Thank you. I'll look forward to it. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? Dad, Melody said sharply. What? He shrugged. I'm just asking. Logan smiled. Our entire family is headed out of state to visit some friends. He nodded. Well, that sounds like a good time. Always, Logan said with a nod. And that is the end of chapter 22.